One of the most urgent tasks for our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday, and this is the best day of the week. And not just because the weekend is almost here, but because this is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. My name is Jim Lakely. I am Vice President of the Heartland Institute and the host of your program today. The Heartland Institute is an organization that has been around for 41 years, and we are known as the leading global think tank pushing back on climate alarmism. Heartland, this show, bring you the data, the science, the truth that counters the climate alarmist narrative you've been fed every single day of your life. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will help us out by bringing friends to see this show live streaming to the world every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And also like, share, and subscribe, and leave your comments underneath the video. These all do the magic of convincing YouTube's algorithm to smile upon this program. And that gets the show in front of even more people. And a quick reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not really approve of the way that we cover climate and energy policy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to help out this program, and I really hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. And you can join other friends of this program who help bring the show to the world every single week. And we also want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, What's Up With That, the CO2 Coalition, and our friends at Heartland UK Europe. Let's get started. We have a big show today. We actually just added in some new stuff right before we went to air. We have with us, as usual today, Anthony Watts. He's a senior fellow at the Heartland Institute and the publisher of the world's most viewed website on climate change, What's Up With That? We have Sterling Burnett. He's the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. Unfortunately, Linnea Lukin is traveling today, and she's been having some traveling problems. Her flight has been delayed continually. We want to blame global warming, but I think it just might be a competence on the part of the airline. So she will not be with us today. And we also hope to have, maybe at the end, a very special guest, which I won't even reveal his name, but he was supposed to be on at the start. He might be here at the end. And if he's here, I'll let you know that he's here. So welcome, guys. Got a big show going today. How you doing?
So far, so good.
Doing
Climate
well.
change has still not killed me.
Yeah.
Well, it's a glorious day. Some good things are happening. And I want to make a request to our audience, probably a quarter to a third when they come on. They tell us hello from sunny Surrey or one other place. I'm hoping that from now on, everybody who signs on with whatever they want to say, they also tell us where they're from, because I just think it's inspiring to me personally to see the reach. And I'd actually like to report on it and report saying, look, we got watchers from 50 states and 20 countries. So if y'all could think to do that, I'd appreciate it.
It is amazing how many people check in the roll call in our chat in the beginning of the show, and we appreciate every one of you in the chat. It's always so much more fun and engaging to have you here, so thank you for that. But yeah, check in from where you're from. I know that we have viewers from all over the world, and that's, as Sterling said, pretty inspiring. We're happy to be here to do it. All right. Before we get into the crazy climate news of the week, we have some breaking news. Anthony shared this breaking news with us literally minutes before we went live with this stream, and we thought it'd be good to alert all of you to this very happy breaking news. This comes from the Hill newspaper, and it says, Duffy says climate science will, quote, move aside, with NASA only focusing on space exploration. So I'll read a little bit from here for y'all. Acting NASA Administrator Sean Duffy said Thursday that the climate and earth science at the agency will, quote, move aside as it refocuses solely on space exploration. Quote, all the climate science and all the other priorities that the last administration had at NASA, we're going to move aside. And all of the science that we do is going to be directed toward exploration, which is the mission of NASA, said Duffy, who also leads the transportation department. He told that to Fox Business. Quote, that is why we have NASA. It is to explore, not to do all of these earth sciences. NASA, which stands for the National Aeronautics and Space Agency, explores both air and space. It has historically conducted science related to both Earth and space, including climate science. A pivot away from climate science is not necessarily a surprise. The Trump administration has sought to deny and downplay climate change's impact and has moved to dismantle scientific research, including by dismissing scientists working on the National Climate Assessment. But moving to get rid of all climate science at NASA may still be an escalation, says The Hill. So, Anthony, you brought this to our attention, as I mentioned, just before we went live, and you obviously think this is good news. Why don't you tell us why that is?
Well, first of all, the whole climate change, global warming thing got started with NASA GISS in 1988. In June of 1988, the then director of NASA GISS, Dr. James Hansen, went before Congress and said, we have this climate problem. CO2 is increasing in the atmosphere. It's going to warm up. Here's my models. The future looks grim. We need a solution. And of course, Congress reacted by throwing money at it immediately, and thus the whole climate grift was born. The backstory on all of that is that his sponsor, Timothy Wirth, a senator from Colorado at that time, he and Timothy Wirth called up the Weather Bureau in Washington, D.C. It was called the Weather Bureau at that time. And they asked, what's going to be the hottest day in June? We got to do this hearing, blah, 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 you know. So they found out from the Weather Service or Weather Bureau what is going to be the hottest day. And that's when they scheduled the hearing. And then the night before, because their science just wasn't strong enough to convince anybody, apparently, they went into this hearing room and disabled the air conditioner and opened up the windows so that it would be hot the next day during the hearing. And of course, that happened. And what happened was that they had the TV cameras on these people, and people were sweating. And Timothy Wirth described it later as bliss. And he admitted to doing the whole dirty deed of doing the stagecraft. And so climate science got started with fakery. And NASA GISS continued to push this issue. And another backstory, and this is my own personal opinion, I've got some research to support it, but it's still more opinion than not because it's kind of hard to find things back in that era. But I believe that NASA GISS switched their focus. Originally, they were a planetary science investigation team, you know, for when probes would be landing on Venus, probes would be landing on Mars. They needed to understand the atmosphere and so forth and so on. Well, when the Apollo program was canceled after Apollo 17, there was no more planetary science to do, you know, for that group. So they had to come up with something new. And I think climate change was the trick that they got to be able to keep on and continue their funding. And of course, they got millions for that. NASA GISS became worldwide prominent, but they overreached. And that overreach has caused what we see today. They got booted out of their office a couple of months ago, the one that's right above Tom's Restaurant, aka Monk's Restaurant from the Seinfeld show. And, so they got booted out of their office, and now it looks like they're going to be booted out of NASA. So good riddance.
Sterling, this is going to be spun that if NASA is not doing climate science for the United States government and for the world, that we are burying our heads in the sand. I mean, in other words, if NASA doesn't do this science, who else is going to do it?
Gee, I guess agencies that were tailored to do this. Oh, wait, we don't have any agencies that were set up to study climate change. Not a single one. Congress never funded an agency to do climate change. It's all mission creep. And anytime we can scale back mission creep and get agencies that were formed for one thing and one thing only, and given directions to study one thing for one reason only, to do that, that's a good thing. Even the Goddard GISS, what's the name? Goddard Institute for Space Studies. Do you see the word climate in there? Do you even see the word weather in there? You don't. They weren't formed to do that. And you know what? we can talk about whether they should or not, but if they want to do that, they should be charged by Congress specifically to do that. Congress should pass a law making it not a space agency, but a climate agency. We have a weather service. We have NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, to study the Earth. NASA's supposed to study space and to get us out into space. Full stop. That's it. Nothing else.
Well,
Yep.
we wanted to share that good news with everybody. Go ahead, Anthony. You can tie a bow on this.
Yeah, it's a classic case of mission creep with NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies. You know, as I said, they started out as an agency studying planetary atmospheres to enable landings, you know, by NASA on different planets. Then their mission creep basically threw away looking at all of the other planets and turned into studying Earth exclusively. And so,
and you know, to the extent that they control the satellites that study hurricanes from space, that monitor hurricanes, that can be turned over to an agency charged with doing things on Earth. NASA should focus on space. Other agencies that are charged with studying weather and things should focus on Earth. NASA can launch their satellites, or better yet, you know, Elon Musk's SpaceX can launch those satellites, because that's who's really launching satellites nowadays.
yeah. Well, and, you know, I'm really not tired of all this winning that we've been seeing lately. You know, it just keeps happening every week. We keep seeing more winning. The whole climate crusade is being dissolved on lots of different levels. And so what's going to happen is the focus is going to shift from government agencies pushing propaganda down our throats to private firms like Climate Central pushing propaganda down our throats. One other point I want to make about NASA guests. You mentioned, Sterling, that, you know, they control the satellites. NASA does. But guess what? NASA guests, and specifically Dr. Gavin Schmidt, would not have anything to do with satellite data measuring Earth temperature. So much so that when Gavin Schmidt and Dr. Roy Spencer were to appear on a television program with John Stossel about a decade ago, Gavin Schmidt refused to sit in the same TV studio with Dr. Spencer. And so, you know, the pettiness that was on display was just extraordinary. And so they're getting, you know, the karma is coming around full circle for these guys.
Well, though, I'll say this. I don't know if this is one of the articles we have, but an article came out just yesterday or the day before in Nature that argued we've got to keep going on climate science because there's so much uncertainty and so many unknowns. We don't know what the weather impacts will be. I don't know.
Wait, the science is settled.
I was about to say, I've been told for 20 years, 25 years, the science is settled. I bring this up every time I debate one of these climate scientists. If it's settled, let's move on. Let's stop funding your stuff, and we'll put it on figuring out how to respond to all the potential disasters, not studying whether they're coming, because you've said it's settled. Now they've suddenly discovered the science isn't settled. Why? Because funding is getting cut off. It's just what I said would happen.
Well, I would say that now, given what we've seen, we can change that phrase from the science is settled to the science is scuttled.
Yep. Well, you know, I can't help but think that if these government agencies, you know, focused on delivering the product of actual science and scientific observation instead of flooding the zone with propaganda and scare tactics and all of that, that maybe you guys would still be in the climate observation business, but you can't be trusted. So Trump's shutting you down. So celebrate that good news by smashing that like button, as I just put down on the scroll. All right. Now we're going to start our favorite segment every single week, and that is the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Andy. Yeah, I can't help but think that Bill Nye is a little upset today, and that makes me happy. All right. When dinosaurs ruled the earth. I took that little title from one of my favorite movies, and you know what it is, I'm sure. This comes from Earth.com. Dinosaur teeth reveal CO2 levels and climate conditions in the Jurassic period. I'll read a bit from it. Dinosaur teeth are best known for their bite, yet new research says they also stored a chemical snapshot of prehistoric air. By probing that record, scientists have rebuilt carbon dioxide levels and plant productivity for the age of dinosaurs with a detail once thought impossible. The researchers focused on the Mesozoic era, a span from 252 million to 66 million years ago, when ecosystems ran hot and lush. Results show late Jurassic skies carried about 1,200 parts per million of CO2, roughly 4 times the pre-industrial benchmark of 280 parts per million. By the late Cretaceous, CO2 dipped to near 750 parts per million. That is still 3 times today's level. Greater plant productivity could explain how giant herbivores found enough calories to thrive. High output also suggests rapid carbon cycling. Fast plant growth pulls CO2 from the air, but equally fast decay and volcanism can add it back, creating a dynamic greenhouse. Now, Sterling, of course, humans were not around between 252 and 66 million years ago driving their SUVs, but mammals were on the Earth. So this idea that humans pushing CO2 levels above 400 parts per million, which is where we are now, will endanger all life on Earth, as the alarmist narrative goes, has never been true.
It's never been true. Of course not. Anyone who's lived in a submarine, or anyone served in a submarine or been in space, they know that carbon dioxide emissions well above ambient levels don't harm humans. I have walked into classrooms to speak to students with a carbon reader, and I asked them to breathe over it, and they put out 700 to 1,500 parts per million of CO2. They're not dead. It was in their lungs before it came out. They're not dead. It's always been a scam. It's always been, well, this will have a small increase will have rolling impacts, huge impacts on climate. Well, the climate of those ages, I think they use the word lush. Most environmentalists I know like lush climates. They argue we need more trees, we want more forest, we want more jungles. They always argue that those things are good for biodiversity. Suddenly they want us to kill the chemical that makes it all possible. This has always been about control. It's always been about them being able, through the control knob of CO2, trying to dictate how other people live. Note I say other people. They're not going to stop living the way they want to live. They want their large homes. Look, some of them on the ground, some of the real believers have these hovels that they only have solar, or they brush their teeth once a week, or, shower once a month. But most of them don't. DiCaprio doesn't live like that. John Kerry certainly doesn't live like that. They want to live their lifestyles while having everyone else put on hair shirts and live poor, like poor people in poverty-stricken countries. And they certainly don't, God forbid, they allow developing countries to get to the levels where we are. And they'll tell you that. No, they can't develop like us. It will kill the planet. It won't kill the planet. The planet survived ice ages. The planet survived much hotter periods, and life has flourished during those hotter periods, even amongst higher CO2, not because of higher CO2, but with higher CO2. So I want to say this about someone said, Bill Nye. I wonder if Bill Nye and all these people have investments in like acid indigestion companies that make the little tablets or the pills, because if not, they should probably invest in it, because I have a feeling they're going to be using a lot more of that stuff, and at least they'll profit from it.
Yep. All right. We can move on to our next item then, which we will do right now. And this is the idea that trees might be getting more flammable. This article comes to us from New Scientist. Trees may be getting more flammable because of climate change. Researchers are apparently testing whether increasing UV radiation is altering the chemistry of tree leaves, increasing the likelihood and severity of wildfires. Rebecca Knoll of the University of Exeter in the UK is setting conifer trees alight in the hope of answering burning questions about the future of forest fires. Knoll is among a group of researchers who suspect it isn't just drought and other direct effects that are boosting the risk of fires. Quote, is climate change actually changing the plants themselves? We're pretty sure it is, unquote, she says. Noel believes that the leaf chemistry of trees is being altered by climate stressors, such as increasing ultraviolet radiation, which makes plants produce more airborne chemicals known as volatiles in a type of stress response. Studies have shown that exposing some food and medicinal crops to higher levels of UVB triggers an increase in volatile compounds in their leaves. Separate analysis indicates that high levels of volatiles in conifers, such as pine trees, increases their flammability. Now, Anthony, maybe we'll start with you. I wouldn't think that a potential increase in UV radiation from the sun reaching the earth could be blamed on humans living their lives as they want, but no. This article is apparently blaming us for that too.
Well, yeah, here's the point. Ultraviolet radiation monitoring in the atmosphere is a relatively recent development with the satellite era. I mean, we've had some ground-based instruments, but it hadn't been commonly measured. But basically, we have data going back to about 1978. And two things have happened. So yeah, there's been a little bit of a UV increase, but also that correlates with the fact that we had the Environmental Protection Agency, passing rules to basically cause industry to have less particulates being emitted, less volatile compounds being emitted. And so the atmosphere got more transparent because we made the atmosphere cleaner. And so that made more UV. So does that make trees more flammable? Honestly, I don't know. But it's just another example of the kind of climate porn we've seen out there, where they will take anything that they can get their hands on, any kind of a trend that they can stamp, this was done by science on it, and then market that as a scare story. And that's what this is, just another scare story.
I'm sorry. Every piece of wood I've ever burned was plenty flammable enough. The charcoal that I burned, plenty flammable enough, all made from wood products that have decomposed and been compacted over time. I don't know how you make something that easily burns, something that more easily burns. How do they tease out the percentage of, well, it's 2% more likely easily burned. If you put a match to it, you pour gasoline on it and it burns easily, whatever. But it's 2% more likely to go up in flames faster. This is the kind of research. My suspicion is that government funded back some of this research. We funded it through some agency. We awarded to somebody money based on they put a proposal. We'd like to see if wood burns more because of climate change, if it's more flammable, if wood's more flammable. And someone said, boy, that sounds like a good idea to fund.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if Linnea was here, she would be pointing out that this has all the hallmarks of a study that you get funded because you put a climate change angle in it. And without that angle, there's no way you get funding for this. And again, hopefully we'll see fewer and fewer of these kinds of studies because the Trump administration at least seems to be turning off the spigot for this sort of nonsense. So, all right,
with a dollar sign in the S.
Yeah, sure. All right, and now our next item here. This was inevitable, I suppose, but alarmists are now going to go to court and sue to stop climate realism from taking a foothold in our federal government and policy. So this comes from Anthony Watts at What's Up With That. Actually, it comes from a friend of this show, Charles Rotter. Headline is the consensus strikes back. Climate empire launches legal assault on the EPA. So let me lay this out for us, for our panel and for our audience, so that you are well informed. This week, the Environmental Defense Fund and the Union of Concerned Scientists stormed into federal court, clutching their pearls and a 40-page complaint to demand that EPA and the Department of Energy be stopped from, brace yourself, listening to people who don't think climate change is the meteorological equivalent of Armageddon. Again, this is the wonderful prose here is from our friend Charles Rotter. The lawsuit filed in the U.S. District Court of the District of Massachusetts reads like a mashup of Chicken Little's autobiography and a high school debate club's appeal to consensus handbook. According to the plaintiffs, the great crime here is that Secretary of Energy Christopher Wright dared to assemble 5 well-known climate skeptics, John Christie, Judith Curry, Stephen Koonin, Ross McKittrick, and Roy Spencer, to review the evidence and produce a report questioning the EPA's 2009 so-called endangerment finding. That's the sacred ruling, declaring greenhouse gases an official public health menace, without which the climate policy priesthood fears their altar might crumble. The complaint is a parade of consensus incantations, overwhelming scientific consensus, ocean of evidence, confirmed time and again, interrupted only by ad hominem swipes at the working group's resumes and reading lists. EDF and UCS accuse Wright's climate working group of operating in secret, holding no public meetings, stacking the deck entirely with contrarians, and failing to genuflect before the holy consensus. They demand that the court erase the group's report, bar EPA from using it to justify repealing the endangerment finding, and, naturally, extend public comment periods until the paperwork gods are appeased. Anthony, you're the one this week who suggested we talk about this show, this topic on the show today, and this was wholly expected. But I have a feeling it still kind of set you off.
Yeah, well, you're right. It was completely expected. We knew that there was going to be lawsuits. What I didn't know was that their first salvo was going to be so full of rhetoric and so lacking in science. I mean, if you go read through the filing, it's a lot of whining in there. Consensus says, they're all about consensus in this filing, and so. Consensus is not science. We've known this for years. And the consensus that they supposedly have, that 97%, we've proven that is completely made up for the most part. There was about 71 different climate scientists around the world that responded to that survey put together by John Cook. And that does not reflect the whole viewpoint of the rest of science. It's just bogus. So they're grasping at straws here. They're throwing out mud, trying to stick it to the wall to see if, in fact, anything will stick. They had to do something because their fan base demanded it, so to speak. But what's interesting about this is that they were complaining about secret meetings. Well, gosh, I seem to remember that there were some secret meetings going on with people like Bill McKibben and Naomi Oreskes and so forth down in San Diego some years back, where they were coming up with a way to, take down ExxonMobil. And that was a secret meeting. We never heard about it until years later when we finally dug up some FOI stuff on it. So, the whole thing is just, I don't know, it's just lame.
Well, how about the secret meetings of ClimateGate? How long ago was that scandal now? It seems so far in the rearview mirror, but we don't forget about it. But it wasn't exactly a meeting, but it was a series of emails over years blackballing anybody who didn't toe the line of climate alarmism from literally every peer-reviewed journal that anybody has any respect for.
20 years, for at least 20 years, not just climate science, by the way, almost all the science at EPA defending clean air rules or promoting stricter standards, clean water and stricter standards, has all been done in secret. They hold public hearings after the science is in, but they have fought for over a decade now any kind of transparency. We have pushed laws. We have promoted laws. One of them called the secret, Ending Secret Science Act, something like that, right? Where they would have to make public, the science used. It would have to be testable. The data would have to be available for outside researchers. We pushed transparency, and they fought it every step of the way and blocked it. And now their complaint is, it wasn't transparent. Look, that's crocodile tears. And so that's the worst possible leg they could stand on, because all of these things have been done in secret. The justification for the endangerment finding was done in secret. It was just, once we came to our conclusion, now we've launched it. You can comment on it. That's what they've done here. They've launched a report, and you're allowed to comment on it. You have a comment period. That's what they do every time they issue something. So they don't have a legal leg to stand on there. Secondly, is bad as a matter of form legally, because specifically, as Judy Curry said 2 weeks ago, right? They didn't address the endangerment finding. This was out of the Department of Energy talking about climate science, and they don't address the endangerment finding at all. In fact, the endangerment finding was withdrawn before this science report came out, and it doesn't reference the science report. So they're unconnected. They can't get at the endangerment finding through this lawsuit because it has nothing to do with the endangerment finding.
Yeah, and I would point out, Sterling.
It's really poorly thought out from a legal strategy perspective.
Yeah, I would point out, Sterling, that ClimateGate happened because of lack of transparency. Steve McIntyre, Willis Etchenbach, and others were putting out FOIA requests, to the Climate Research Unit in England, and they were resisting it tooth and nail. And so what ended up happening, we believe, we're not totally sure about this, but we're pretty confident about this, is that they figured eventually they're going to lose the FOIA appeals and they're going to have to release those emails and so forth. So their FOIA officer at the Climate Research Unit gathered together all of the emails and put them into a zip file and stuck them on a server somewhere. Well, somebody, we don't know who, he calls himself Mr. FOIA, who launched ClimateGate with a posting on WhatsApp with that says a miracle has occurred, and then gave us a link to a server in Russia where he had found the zip file at CRU and sent it over to this so we could publicly get to it. Basically said, you know what, these guys are skirting the law, and there's some stuff in here that people need to know. And that's when ClimateGate happened, because of the lack of transparency. And so, yes, you're right, Sterling. This whole, it wasn't transparent, is a bunch of crocodile tears.
And you're too kind. You're a kind man, Anthony. They weren't skirting. They didn't find loopholes. They were violating the law. And we have their emails, the ClimateGate emails tell you they're violating the law. They said, look, we have these Freedom of Information Act requests. Destroy your data before they get a hold of it. Could you please destroy this email chain so no one knows what we were saying, which is illegal because they were public agencies with public funding.
Yeah.
Sterling got
either the internet failed at his place. So there he is.
You got interrupted there, Sterling, in the middle of your rant.
I said, well, all I'm saying is they were breaking the law and they didn't get away with it. They didn't find a loophole. By law, those things were searchable. They're foiable. And it didn't end with ClimateGate more than a decade ago, right? Even, I don't know, just a few years ago, researchers at Arizona State University had still been fighting not to release their research, and their university was defending them. And finally, the state Supreme Court said, you got to release this stuff. It's public.
Yeah.
Public paid for it. You work for the public. Get it out there. And when it did, it made them look stupid and like the liars they were.
Oh, but they were saving the planet. Don't you understand? When you're saving the planet, you don't have to do this stuff because saving the planet's more important than the law.
The ends justify the means. It goes back to Plato's The Noble Lie, except this is an ignoble lie.
Yeah. Well, there is a new report now coming out from the National Academy of Sciences. We've talked about this on the program. I know last week and maybe even the week before. It just seems to me that the Climate Alarmist Industrial Complex is going to be pulling out all the stops to prevent any sensible science or policy to be part of the official record or even entering the public conversation. Although I do find it angers me, and it's also ironic that only now, and I said this last week, only now is it really important that the other side is displayed and heard and allowed into the conversation, whereas for literally decades, as Sterling just explained and Anthony too, talking about the ClimateGate scandal, the scandal was that they were these are public officials using public money, scheming to leave out anything or anybody who disagreed with them in the public square and in academia and in any government reports, and then eventually all the way to the UN's climate reports. But now, oh my God, you have to stop everything. There needs to be an injunction. Let's go to court. Stop them so that we can get the alarmist stuff back in there again. It makes my head explode.
Yeah. For more than a decade and a half, when this first started, they were willing to debate. But now for more than a decade and a half, they've been unwilling to debate. and they've through the media they've won, the mainstream media, I should say. And then the rise of social media and the internet came, and they started losing there, and they were outraged. Read Blue Sky. You know, you go to Blue Sky and read those posts and see how outraged they are that they actually have to now engage with climate realists. And now climate realists are getting more play and getting back into the mainstream media. They can't ignore us any longer. And they thought they had won that war. They hadn't won the policy war, but they thought they'd won the media debate. They thought they'd won the science, as if there's an official, we are the science. And, you know, a foot comes down and stamps on anyone who denies the science. And they hadn't won it. And they're outraged at that. Like I said, the funniest thing about this lawsuit to me is that for more than a decade and a half, they've been arguing against transparency. We got to keep some things secret because of privacy concerns and this, that, and the other. Now they're like, here's these guys' addresses. There's no privacy, and it's not transparent because we actually weren't in the room listening to them as they wrote their report, getting to edit it along the way. The hypocrisy is like a large glowing neon sign above their foreheads.
Anthony, are you concerned about the National Academy of Sciences report that we know they're working on and will release?
Oh, not really, because the Trump administration has made it clear that they're not going to tolerate any of this shenanigans anymore. I mean, you look at their record on crime and everything else, they're just not going to tolerate BS. And a lot of this report is going to be BS. One thing I want to change hats here and go and mention that this is something that I and many, many other people have been fighting now since about 2006, 2005. What's Up With That was founded in 2006, and we have been at it every day since then. Likewise, the Heartland Institute has been at it every day since then, and more recently with climaterealism.com. So for those of you that are watching, I would like to make this plea. We've been in the trenches. We've been taking the slings and arrow. We've been taking the abuse. We have been taking the smears. And if you can support us, you know, by going to climaterealism.com or to whatsupwiththat.com and throw a couple of bucks our way, we would greatly appreciate it. Because as you know, we talk about how Google has basically says, climate deniers, we're not going to allow you anymore. No more ads for you. Well, that happened to me, and it happened to Climate Realism. It happened to the Heartland Institute. It happened to this show. So if you can throw a few bucks our way, it would be very, very appreciated.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for that public service announcement, Anthony. And people watching on the watching this show on YouTube and Rumble and X may notice that Anthony and I are attired in the exact same shirt. You know, later on today is the company picnic, and then we'll be heading off to an amusement park to ride the roller coasters together and get our pictures taken. It's great.
Right.
The roller coaster is being powered by a coal-fired power plant that the Trump administration kept open.
100%.
Just for our enjoyment.
All right. Well, let's get to our main topic that's in the thumbnail today, and that is the title for this this countering climate porn. It's
Wait, please.
Yep.
I didn't get to comment on the NAS, and I think it's I've got at least a little important insight.
Go ahead.
So Trump can ignore the NAS. My suspicion is if Trump made it clear that when this report comes out, all future funding for NAS activities and Natural Research Council, no money can be used to study climate. And from the National Research Council, which is actually doing the report, if he said that ends if this report comes out, my suspicion is the report dies tomorrow. Now, Trump can try and ignore it, but what it will be used for is the alarmists will go to court and say the National Academy of Sciences, the official imprimatur, has said the DOE report is junk. This is what they should be doing. And so Trump's got to reconsider all this stuff. And the courts, they often defer to the National Academy of Sciences, saying, well, we're not the scientific experts. These guys are. So I think it's still a danger. Trump may ignore it, but it's not clear to me the courts will. maybe if it reaches the Supreme Court, but a lot of costs, a lot of delays can go on in the meantime. You know how these courts have been trying to hold up Trump by just stopping him, issuing nationwide injunctions, defying the Supreme Court when it says, no, this can go forward. And then a district court says, oh, we're not going to let it. I don't think it is that unimportant. I think it still it still concerns me some.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
so
we'll
maybe
be
we are reaching the beginning of the end rather than the end here.
There you go.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, we will be here to cover this, obviously, on this show. And so you'll be up to speed on what's going on with that. It's very important and exciting news on the climate front, the climate realism front. And that's what this show is for. All right. So our main topic today, we've put it on the thumbnail, and its title is Countering Climate Porn. And that sounds a little crude, but it accurately represents what's going on out there, especially in the media, that they peddle this, and it just seems to be no end. It's everywhere. One of the examples I want to bring up for this, and we will break this down and tear this apart, and this is from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. A supporter of Heartland actually alerted us to this story this week. And it says, a 1,000-year flood, historically bad air quality, extreme heat. Summer 2025 is far from normal in Wisconsin. Let me read a bit from the story here. It says that as of August 12th, Milwaukee will have endured 24 days of poor air quality from the Canadian wildfire smokes, 38 days of extreme heat, and a mess of disasters from the past weekend's 1,000-year flood. Summer 2025 is anything but normal, and we're not near summer's end yet. Now, I'll stop for a second and mention that actually we're 2/3 done with summer. I can read a calendar. This reporter apparently can't, but whatever. The story goes on to outline how hot it had been, how the air quality is apparently our fault as well, humans' fault, and how it hasn't been this humid in Wisconsin since 1979. Also, the strong storms that caused flash flooding in southeast Wisconsin, they mentioned that, because that happens. But we're going to get to the crux here. The story claims that all of this is causing a mental health crisis in Wisconsin. So it says here, quote, those feelings of being overwhelmed and anxious and depressed by extreme weather events, we call it solastalgia, said Guthman, a retired public and population health nurse who serves as a member of the Healthy Climate Wisconsin board. Quote, people start to understand the significant existential threat that we're in when it comes to climate and health. Just naming it for people will help them open up and talk about it. Solastalgia combines the words solace and nostalgia and describes the existential or emotional distress caused by environmental changes, especially if that change degrades our sense of home. It can bring about a feeling of homesickness, even if you've never left home. Beyond the biological mechanisms of climate change on behavioral health, like heat's ability to increase suicide rates and aggressive crimes, a survey released last year from the American Psychiatric Association showed the combination of factors related to climate change, wildfires, extreme storms becoming more common, evacuations, has impacted just more than half of all Americans' mental health. Anthony, I'll start with you since Sterling wrapped up our last one there. The term of climate porn. I mean, the idea that heat's ability increases suicide rates, that people are mentally stressed out and need professional therapy because they're so stressed out about the climate. It's because of the media, not because of the weather.
Yeah, we've had severe weather since man existed, and people have always been afraid of it, rightly so. Severe weather can kill you. And the trend, however, is over the last century, severe weather has decreased. We haven't seen more hurricanes or more large tornadoes or anything like that. The data says, severe weather is on the decrease for the most part. What's on the increase is the media coverage of it. And it's pretty simple, really. And I've talked about this on What's Up With That. But the bottom line is this. When I first started doing television weather in 1978, yes, I'm dating myself, I had a TV dinner tray full of magnetic symbols and a teletype machine and a board that I could stick these symbols up to. The teletype machine gave me printouts from the National Weather Service. That was state of the art back then, right? And, storm chasers hardly ever existed. There were a few people in Oklahoma down at, the Norman Severe Storm Center that did this. But the idea of storm chasers going out just because it's fun didn't exist. And all this has evolved over the last 30, 40 years or so. We now have, millions of cameras out there where someone can capture a severe weather event instantly and transmit it over to CNN or MSNBC, and they'll put it on the air immediately, and then they'll start saying, look, climate change caused this tornado to destroy this town. Oh, the humanity. And that's what they do. They simply take anything that's abnormal or exciting weather-wise and turn it into climate porn. And the fact that we've had all these now 24/7 networks that didn't exist 40, 50 years ago is what's really going on. And that's why people are getting freaked out. The increase has not been because of weather increases or severe weather increases. The increase has been because the media has started covering it as if it is disaster of the day. And they turn that into a climate issue falsely without doing any research. And then that scares people. And that fear is unwarranted because the data doesn't support it, but they never tell people that.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'll spill the beans. Our special guest today was supposed to be Chris Martz from CFACT, the star of social media and climate realism for a new generation, Chris Martz. But one of the reasons we were inspired to do this as our main topic today was because he seems to have been super triggered by this idea, and it was in that story in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel about a 1,000-year flood. And Chris Martz explains in his X post here that a 1 in 1,000-year flood is a flood that has a 0.1% chance of occurring in any given year at one specific location. And that last part is key. This recurrence interval only applies to one location at a time. And according to the U.S. Geological Survey, there are 250,000 rivers in the United States within 19,000 watersheds. So since rivers and streams are not at an independent risk of flooding, we can estimate that the expected number of 1,000-year river floods per year using the watershed figure. And with that information, it can be expected that the United States will get 19 1,000-year floods, river floods every single year on average, and that sometimes there will be more than 19, while in other years there will be fewer. And we'll stop it there and throw it to you, Sterling, because I think that's a good point. Unless you're somebody who's researched this and does it for a living, a normie, a layman will hear a 1,000-year flood like happened in Milwaukee, perhaps, that you are the only person in the last 1,000 years to have seen something like that. That's what the brain tells you is the truth, but it is very, very far from the truth.
Yeah, that's what they mislead you into believing they're talking about when they say 1,000-year flood. I wish Linnea was on to talk about this, because she said so much good stuff about the psychology, how it's the media damaging people's. I don't know anything about. Was it nostalgia the lady's talking about? If there is such a thing, if there is climate damage from a psychological term for the angst climate change gives you, that's a creation, wholly a creation of the media and alarmists in public places, not the changing climate, because it's not, you're not seeing more floods, but you're being told you're seeing more floods. Every time a flood happens, you're not seeing more wildfires, but you're being told wildfires, just like in the story, are happening more often. But that's not what the data shows. They don't rely on the data. I almost, you said, oh, climate porn, it's crude. Now, I almost wish the segment had been called Debbie Does Climate or Deep Climate, because it is just as gross, except now they don't have to do the climate porn in dark theaters in bad parts of town. Instead, they plaster it in our newspapers every day. And they don't label it triple X. It's awful. It's lying. It's lying. It's not misleading. It's not partial truth. No, when they tell you floods are becoming more frequent, they're lying to you. When they tell you wildfires are becoming more frequent and taking more acreage, they're lying to you. If they tell you X hurricane was caused by climate change, it's a lie. Not they don't get things. They know. The alarmists know the data. The alarmists know the science. They ignore it because it's inconvenient to their ultimate goal, which is control over our lives. That's not a noble lie. That's an ignoble lie. It's a lie. And that's what we should call it every time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Sterling. Well, we're never going to get this channel monetized with you saying stuff like that. So there goes another 6 months. Sorry, Andy. Sorry, producer Andy. That's it's going to happen. I have up here on screen. I think this is the one I sent to Anthony, maybe, or I should say Andy. Tom Nelson had shared this. These are watermarks on buildings in Europe that show where the highest flood watermark was, and you can see. Actually, you can't really see; it's a little bit too far away. Maybe you could if you use the one that I said. There it is. That's the one I wanted. Great. So if you zoom in, if you squint your eyes, these are all little bricks that have been marble bricks that show the high watermark for flooding at this building in Hahn, Germany. The highest flood mark is 1342. In fact, there is only one mark from the latter half of the 20th century forward, and that is the lowest brick on that measure, or on that in that area, and that was from 1995. So again, you can believe liars who say that the extreme weather is increasing, that we've never seen flooding like this before, or you can, I don't know, walk to a building in Hahn, Germany and see for yourself that it's bullshit. So I'm going to go ahead and swear, Sterling. You've already screwed the channel. So, all right.
Yeah. And I did some research on the term 1,000-year flood. And here's this timeline of that phrase. First known use was in 1937, and it was in engineering language, talking about, building, better buildings and infrastructure and so forth around rivers that may flood. That was the first time it was ever used. And then in the 1960s, the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, came about. And then the term became something of a fairly common use. They were talking about 100 and 1,000-year events. They wanted to have some statistical measure of what to expect for a particular place on flooding. And then recently, now these terms are becoming common in public. The media has picked up on it, just like they did on the polar vortex a few years ago. Remember that? Polar vortex, I knew about that in meteorology school in the 70s. But it wasn't until recently that the term started to become in use because, well, it sounds dramatic and it's something we can lead with, polar vortex causing blah, 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 whatever. Same thing with 1,000-year floods. That is dramatic. And it's climate porn. They're basically putting that into headlines because it sounds clickbaity, and that's what it's about these days. It's clickbait. We on climaterealism.com shoot these kinds of stories down every day of the week and twice on Sunday sometimes. And so it's just climate porn. That's all it is. I can't really come up with any other better phrase than that.
I'm a book collector. I've got some older tomes. Some of them are science books from the 18th and 17th centuries. Some of them are history books. But one of them I've got that's pretty interesting is talking about the great floods in the U.S. in the 1800s when the earth was cooler. I think one of them, I don't recall off the top of my head, but I think one of them was called the Johnstown flood. But there were huge, huge floods when no one was around to say, 1,000-year flood. But I suspect that flood was a so-called 1,000-year flood. Asheville, North Carolina, last year, huge floods, terrible floods. And then they came out with stories saying, it was a climate haven. Everyone thought it was a climate haven. Well, not anyone who'd been, very few people are around less than 100 years ago, but, around 100 years ago, Asheville flooded just like that. A lot of people, destroyed a lot of property, but there were fewer people and less property to be disturbed. And there was certainly less national coverage because there weren't national 24 hours a day television stations. There weren't even TV stations. So weather happens, flooding happens, wildfires happen. The best data, really historic data, research that looks at tree rings and burn patterns and things like that shows that wildfires in California and the Southwest were much more severe and larger than they have been even in the 30s in the US, much less in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. Huge conflagrations. Weather happens. It's always happened. Bad things happen. There's just more people around to be to experience it, to suffer under it, and to report on it now than ever before. And that's what the climate liars, I'm going to quit calling them climate alarmists. That's what the climate liars are lying about.
Yeah. Before we're going to get to Q&A here, I just want to bring up one other example of this this phenomenon, and this Anthony again pointed this out to us because he has a post of it with a wonderful image. And what's up with that? And the headline is, and in fact, there's a headline here from the BBC: "Hot, dry summers bring new fire wave risk to U.S. cities, scientists warn." And it says here, I'll just read two sentences and throw it to you, Anthony. "Cities across the UK are facing a growing threat from an emerging phenomenon called fire waves as temperatures rise due to climate change. Scientists have warned." The term, coined by researchers at Imperial College London, describes multiple urban wildfires triggered by extended periods of hot, dry weather. So again, this is not a term of science. It's a term of propaganda. It's a turn of phrase. And its intention is not to inform, but to scare.
Right. And fire waves have existed for thousands of years. It's called lightning. Lightning goes down and hits an area many, many times and creates several different fires over an area. This is not news. But what is news is they've coined this term. And yes, it's another climate porn term. Now, the fact that the BBC has come up and put this out, you can bet your sweet patootie that this term, fire waves, is going to start showing up on CNN and the New York Times, Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, and all these other outlets. The next time fires happen, you can bet it 100% that this is going to happen.
And honestly, it won't even matter what the weather's like. Look, I don't know what they're talking about urban fires. I don't even know what the weather was like when Mrs. O'Leary's cow in Chicago tipped over the lantern that burned down the entire city. But my suspicion is it would have been called a fire wave, evidence of a fire wave today. I don't know what the weather was like when San Francisco burned to the ground in 1900 or early 1900s. But I suspect now it would be called evidence of a fire wave, which is caused by climate change. The point is, cities have burned throughout history. Often human ignition is the source. We're better at fighting those things now than ever. When government, by the way, doesn't go around starting wildfire controlled burns that then get out of control and burn entire cities where they have to abandon the town, right? When we do the proper forest management to reduce fuel loads, when we do proper urban management to reduce loads around houses, get rid of the brush, we reduce fires. When we allow firefighters to get in there because we don't rip out roads to protect the forest from evil loggers, well, you also protect the forest from good firefighters, stopping them from getting into our towns. This fire waves, like you say, look, it's more climate porn that has no scientific basis.
Yep.
Well, okay. Well, that's great. Fantastic segment, fellas.
Are we going to have fire tsunamis if we have fire waves? They're really, really big fire waves. Are the tsunamis?
Don't give him any ideas, Sterling.
Right. Look, you can't think of something that could be too absurd that could happen in reality in a month. No, I'm not kidding. So don't start. Don't give me any stupid ideas, Sterling. It's hard enough for us to deal with this. What they come up with on their own. All right.
Well, what we can say now is that if the term a fire tsunami shows up in the media, you heard it here first.
That's right. That's right. As a matter of fact, this program, before we get to Q&A, I just want to do a little humble bragging here. This program was mentioned in a story in E&E News, I think it was, which is now owned by Politico, where it was another hit piece on that we covered at the top of this program, or in the middle of this program, a hit piece on those real scientists who produced that report for the Department of Energy that countered alarmist science propaganda. And I guess they reached out to Dr. Judy Curry, and maybe she didn't answer them. So instead, they quoted her from this program of 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and mentioned the Climate Realism show by the Heartland Institute and linked over to the episode itself in that article. That made my week. I really loved seeing that. And that was great. And it is an indication that this show is important. It's news-making. And it's actually, I hope, your weekly place of sanity when it comes to this topic that keeps your head on straight. All right. Linnea's not here to do it, so it's just going to have to be me. It is time for Q&A. And we're not going to hit the
Should we really have done that without Linnea here? The cheering. Are we really that happy for you doing it, Jim? I don't know.
I completely understand the delay in the cheer. I mean, it is me doing it, so that makes sense. All right. So let me bring this question up. Speaking of Dr. Curry, she is not here on the program today. Hopefully we'll have her on again down the line. But maybe Anthony or Skilling can answer this. So what do you guys think caused the cold of the 70s? Did the strongest and longest La Nina have something to do with it?
Well, there's that. There was changes in the jet stream, the polar vortex. Had huge incursions into the United States and Northern Europe during those years. The winter of 1977, 1978 was particularly brutal. I know because I was walking to class in the middle of that, and then they closed the university because the wind chill was so bad and there was a danger to students. But I will point out that we had a lot of particulate matter in the atmosphere in the 60s and 70s, which caused solar dimming. And so that made it colder as well. But then we started cleaning up the atmosphere in the 80s, and so it started warming up. So there was a combination of things, as it always is. It wasn't just one single thing that caused this. It was a multitude of different things that happened. And will we see an outbreak like that again? Yeah, probably. We saw some pretty severe outbreaks like that in 2009. And, we'll see it again. It's weather. It happened. It's normal.
Yep.
Well, I would say that it wasn't the cold of the 70s. It was a 20-year period of temperatures declining. It reached its not zenith. What's it called when it's the lowest point in the 70s? But it had been going on since the 50s. Yeah, the apogee. It had reached that then, and some of the most famous climate alarmists in existence. Steve Snyder's now dead, so no longer in existence. But John Holdren, who was Clinton or Obama's science advisor, they co-authored texts and wrote books talking about the coming ice age based on the trend. It wasn't, just a couple of years, based on the long-term trend. And they said, well, we're overdue for the next ice age. They wrote this book, and as soon as it started warming, they pivoted to, the climate's warming, we're causing it. Now, in both instances, their solution was the same. They didn't blame cooling on human emissions in their book, but their solution was the same: is big government's got to act. You got to have more control for the government.
Yep. Thank you, Albert, very much for your question. I want to mention that our Q&A section on this here program has a sponsor, and that sponsor is Advisor Metals. If you listen to a lot of conservative shows, you hear tons of pitches for buying gold and silver and other precious metals. There are so many companies out there, but we want to tell you why you should trust our sponsor, Advisor Metals, and that's the man who runs the company, Ira Brashatsky. Ira is the managing member of Advisor Metals. He doesn't employ high-pressure tactics or deceptive marketing ploys like many in big gold. He also doesn't deal in rare coins. When you buy gold and other precious metals from Advisor Metals, you're dealing with quality bullion. That is so much better when it comes time to liquidate this valuable physical asset. And when you buy from Advisor Metals, you will have your investment sent directly to your home. So Ira is advertising on this program, by the way, because he is an America First patriot. He doesn't donate to Democrats. He refuses to work with proxies of the Chinese Communist Party. And he, like us, abhor the machinations in the schemes of the World Economic Forum. And we are proud to have Ira and Advisor Metals as a sponsor. So if you want to diversify your investment portfolio, and if you want to back up your IRA with real physical bullion of precious metals, then go to climaterealismshow.com/metals and leave your information there, and Ira will make this process so very easy for you. Again, climaterealismshow.com/metals, and be sure to tell them who sent you, because that helps us as you're helping yourself. All right.
I really like the idea of having metals organization as a sponsor, particularly since they're dealing in gold and so forth, because now we can say we are sponsored by heavy metals. That's what I like about it.
Very good. All right. Our next question here comes from Rick Recht. He says, question, if all climate scientists made predictions for the climate in 5 years' time, would any of them get it right? And should we hold them all accountable after the 5 years?
Well, they've been doing that for 30 years now? Right? How many times has the Arctic going to be ice-free?
Or is New York or is New York Fifth Avenue going to be underwater? Or is Miami going to be underwater? Or is California going to be burned to a crisp? And my favorite, kids just won't know what snow is.
Yeah.
If all the climate scientists made predictions for climate 5 years' time, would any of them get it right? Well, look, I think it's like it depends on the kind of predictions they make. If a climate scientist said, "Well, we're going to have some hurricanes in 5 years' time," I think he's going to get it right. But basically, it'd be a flip of a coin for each phenomena. And when you flip coins, sometimes they get it right just through chance. But if what they're saying is we need to take particular courses of action, those actions are going to cost us a lot. If we adopt any of those actions and then the result doesn't occur, they should be held personally responsible. Their institution should be held personally responsible. My suspicion is predictions like that would end. If the University of Pennsylvania said, Mr. Mann, if you make any predictions that don't come true in 5 years, you lost your position at our university, and you've lost your, not only have you lost your tenure, but you've lost your retirement. My suspicion is he would be silent tomorrow.
No, he would start whining about it tomorrow.
Well, that's true.
He would whine till the cows come home, but then he wouldn't make any of those predictions.
But he wouldn't make those predictions.
Yeah.
Here's a question from Luke Starkenberg, who is a man who brings challenging questions to us every week. Luke, thank you for watching. Question, why are coal power plants so expensive to operate compared to almost any other type of power generation? Do you guys, what is your response to that? Do you accept the premise of that question?
I reject the premise of that. Now, their operating cost can be expensive relative to a wind or solar operating cost because there's very little expense to their operations. Their expenses come in the construction. You have to fuel these things and you have to maintain the machinery. You still have to maintain wind turbines, but it's not across the board, and not every turbine. But the operating cost doesn't account for the true cost or the full cost, because those wind turbines, when they only work 28% of the time, you're still getting your energy from somewhere. When they're fluctuating, you still have to have power from somewhere, and that cost should be attributed to the wind for not functioning. When a coal fuel power plant has to go offline for maintenance, they pay the cost for the backup power. either through oil boilers or through some other source, but they pick up that cost. When wind and solar does, the other facility picks up the cost. In the end, they're not cheaper. And how do you know? Also, the other thing is there's a lot of regulations imposed on coal, some of them unnecessary, that aren't imposed. They're not treated equally from a regulatory perspective. So when you keep stacking on regulations, you raise the cost of coal. Now, if they were all treated equally, if there were no subsidies at all for any energy source, wind and solar are the most expensive sources, except for battery power and offshore wind, which is the most expensive.
Yeah.
No coal plant ever had to go to the state of Virginia and say, yeah, we'll open a coal plant, but only if, no matter what the cost is, they go in and say, here's how much we need. Dominion wants to build a wind farm off the coast of Virginia. They said, they went to their legislature and got it, by the way. We don't know how much we need. It's going to be expensive, but we want whatever the costs are, we want it passed on to ratepayers. Will you approve that? And they said, sure, sounds good to us. I'm sorry. Look at the states where power costs are rising higher. They ain't the states with a lot of coal.
Yeah. Anthony, you have some proof of this?
Well, I have a graphic to discuss. And what's great about being on this show today is that I can bring in my custom trained AI to go find things for me. And it did. And so here we have a comparison of coal, nuclear, natural gas, and solar. Don't have wind in it, but that's okay. Wind blows anyway. So we are looking here at the most expensive is the natural gas peaker plants. And guess what? Those are being put in place of coal plants. You know, the coal plants that are being closed, they're putting in these peaker plants to basically offset, you know, the intermittency of wind and solar. And so that is, in fact, the most expensive. But nuclear is the best deal all around in terms of, you know, stability, long-term, and cost. So, you know, I've always said we should be a nuclear society. We should go towards thorium nuclear reactors, and all of this worry about, you know, power intermittency will go away.
Yep. All right, let's squeeze a few more questions in here before we wrap it up for the week. This is from our friend Engineer Guy SE. Hey, update on hurricane season. How we doing?
What hurricane season?
Well, don't we have one out there in the Atlantic right now?
It's still a tropical storm, as far as I know. I don't think Aaron has reached hurricane speeds. I could be wrong if it has in the last 30 minutes or so. But right now, it's still a tropical storm. By the way, it was supposed to have reached hurricane speeds by Wednesday and major hurricane speeds by today. It did not do so. Now they're saying maybe Sunday. Who knows what will happen to Aaron? But it's not a hurricane unless something changed in the last hour. It hasn't. It's not a hurricane yet.
Well, we're going to have our friend Stan Goldenberg on here again, and in fact, maybe we'll bring in Dr. Judy Curry and Stan to compare notes, because Tech asks, how often has Dr. Curry's company predictions of hurricanes beaten the government's predictions? And in fact, we know through Dr. Curry, that's another private hurricane predictor. And we have our friend Joe Bastardi, who also at Weatherville, who does private hurricane predictions. And then we have Stan from the government, who has his own crowdsourced, I suppose, government scientific predictions, and they're not all the same. And I think I'm thinking Stan is the most wrong right now. No offense, Stan, but you tend to be a little higher. You were last year. We'll see where you come in. And I'm sorry, Sterling, I'll let you go in a minute. Stan did tell us last year that when we were getting cocky, it's like, it's going to be fine. That we're going to have a good late season. And he was right about that.
I didn't know Judy did hurricane prediction. I knew that that Joe Bastardi did. He's had that going for a while. In the end, hurricanes will come. And will they? Remember, the prediction at the start of the year is named storms. Well, we're up to E. There have all been tropical storms, none of them hurricanes yet. Typically, the peak, it may surprise some to find, is September. So we haven't reached the peak of the season yet, but we are late for the first hurricane formation by a couple of weeks now.
Yeah, it's late.
Usually there's at least one in early August or mid-July, and sometimes two. But
one thing we can agree on is that the worst predictor of this will undoubtedly be Michael Mann. Hey, Mike. Hope you're watching. All right. Let's give a couple more here real quick. Mike Atuso, he says, does home solar ever go into the grid? I've been told it goes straight into the ground. They can't trust the voltage frequency and do not need it, but ratepayers pay for it anyway. I think you have experience with home solar, don't you, Anthony?
Yeah, I put on solar on my home back in 2005. I set it up for the local school district when I was a member of the school board. It goes straight into the grid. It has never gone straight into the ground. What he might be referring to, though, is that sometimes in certain venues, like in the UK and EU, they will pay solar farms to basically throw out the electricity or not produce it. That might be what he's referring to. But in terms of real, actual solar on your home, it goes straight into the grid. There's frequency matching that goes on between the inverter and the grid, and it gets fed into it. And then there's a special meter that you get put in that shows the backflow of electricity going into the grid. And so it reduces your rate because it creates an inverse power flow, and the meter registers that.
And this is one of those instances that Luke ignores when he says the operating cost is cheaper for coal. I mean, it's more expensive for coal. These home solars, the cost of the inverters and the grid cost of having to up and down based upon the hundreds or thousands of rooftop solars in a region, that's not borne by the owner of the system. They are paid the wholesale rate, not the retail rate to get into the grid. I mean, they're paid I'm sorry, that's not true. They're paid the retail rate for their power, not the wholesale rate that any other generator would put onto the grid. So that's an added cost to solar that's not being counted by Luke.
All right.
Yeah, and here's one other thing that the really ugly thing that I found about solar the first year. It was a shock to me. They have something at PG&E in California called a true up at the end of the year. So let's say over the year you use 100,000 kilowatts, but solar on your house only made up for 80,000 kilowatts. Okay, kilowatt hours. Pardon me. So at the end of the year, they say, okay, well, there's a difference of 20,000 kilowatt hours. And instead of charging you on a monthly basis, like you normally get your electric bill, they have a year-end true-up, and all of a sudden you're responsible for paying for a 20,000 kilowatt hour bill. It can be a real sticker shock.
Yeah. All right, let's get a couple science questions in here before we have to wrap it up. This is from Ian McMillan. I don't know if we can answer this or not. We'll give it a shot. Ian asks, does Henry's law apply to CO2 since it reacts with seawater? Is it possible to calculate the ocean-atmosphere ratio of CO2 since ocean surface temperatures vary between regions and even between daytime and nighttime?
I'm going to answer with a simple, direct answer. Yes, no, and maybe. That's all I can say about it.
Okay, well then Jim Moses also asked another CO2 question. Is it true that that very model of the climate crisis scientists are based on the false assumption that more CO2 equals warmer temperatures and therefore are inherently biased?
Well, yeah, there's been that inherent bias for a long time. But what's really true about CO2 in the atmosphere is that as you get more CO2 in the atmosphere, its effect becomes less and less because it's a logarithmic effect. And we have that on the open of our show every time with Jim saying it, the ability of CO2 to cause more warming, so forth and so on. So it's not really a crisis. There's never going to be a tipping point due to CO2. It has to do with the fact that it's getting less and less effective. And if you look at our temperatures taking out the El Nino over the since 2015, we're in a decline now in temperature globally because the El Nino disappeared. We didn't see a big peak in carbon dioxide in 2015. We saw a peak in ocean temperature, which then translated into the atmosphere, which is a natural occurrence going on for millennia.
I hear the song, but I'd like to answer.
Go ahead.
It's not clear to me. You're right. Their models are biased. There is an assumption. More CO2 equals higher temperatures. They treat it like it's a closed system, and our climate is not a closed system. And they don't understand all the other factors that affect temperature. So there's not a direct correlation between more CO2 and higher temperatures. And that was true even before you take into account the saturation effect.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone in the chat, for those wonderful questions. I hope we answered them to your satisfaction. Thank you, Anthony Watts, and from the Heartland Institute, and also Sterling Burnett, also from the Heartland Institute. I know that Linnea Lucan could not be here, and that was a great disappointment, not just to us, but to every one of you. She should be back next week, and I hope she was listening on the road. I want to thank our streaming partners, Junk Science, CFAX, the CO2 Coalition, Climate Depot, What's Up With That, and Heartland UK Europe. Thank you very much to our producer behind the scenes, Andy Singer, making sure everything looks and sounds and is presented very, very professionally. Always visit climaterealism.com. You can go to climateataglance.com with our soon-to-be updated book, Climate at a Glance. Look at Energy at a Glance for some of the answers to some of the questions that we answered right here on today's show. And as always, go to heartland.org where you can subscribe to the Climate Change Weekly newsletter authored by one H. Sterling Burnett, PhD. Thank you to our wonderful audience, especially those in the chat that were here today. Spread the word, bring more people to the show next week, and we will talk to you next Friday. Bye-bye.